What is up, everybody, and welcome back into Dog Talk. Man, it's so glad to be back with you guys. It is the start of season 5 of Dog Talk. Really hard to believe that it's already been 5 years doing this, and I've had fun every single year. This year coming in a little bit later than when I would normally be coming in. Usually I would have started back probably a month ago by now, but I've had quite a bit that's been going on. I'm not really going to dive into it, just going to dive into Dog Talk because I'm excited about that. We're only 8 days away from the start of the season by the time this episode comes out, and that's what I'm looking forward to in this time. So as we get started with Season 5, there's not going to be any visual to the show starting this season. I don't know if there's going to be a point in time where I will get visual up and running. If that time does come, obviously I'll let you guys know. But in the meantime, you can listen wherever you listen on podcasts. I will still put this up on YouTube, but it'll just be audio only. So if you go over to the YouTube channel and you see that there is an episode there, it is just know that all it's going to be is audio on there. There won't be any true visuals to it starting this season. Like I said, a lot going on, but hopefully at some point in time I can get to a position where I can get some kind of visuals going for us to kind of get that back up and running. Speaking of YouTube, over on all of the socials, Instagram, Facebook, and X, you can follow us there at DogTalk20. We greatly appreciate all that. Now, let's kind of get into things. Like I said, talked about the visual side of things right now, potentially happening later this season, potentially not. Some of the things we're going to go through tonight, we're going to talk about some of the SEC championship things that I've kind of looked at and maybe I've had a little bit of a heart change on. Just how complicated is the 12-team playoff, because the more I kind of dove into it, the more I see much more complication from it than I thought that there was going to be at the beginning of this. And a lot of this has to do because I've been playing the College Football 25 game, and if you guys have played it yet and made it to the playoffs, you kind of know what I'm talking about, just how hectic the playoff might actually be when we get to that point in time, because we have not seen that. We have not seen that live in real life. You've had the opportunity to be able to play it in game. And you've had the ability to be able to at least see the news about what's coming and how they're going to do it. But until you actually see it in some kind of a fashion, you don't really know what to expect. So that's something we're going to kind of talk about and dive into. The Carson Beck hype, I want to talk a little bit about that coming into the season. Obviously, again, the season is only 8 days away as this episode is released. We're jumping a little bit into Clemson coming up next week, and some of those things. And then obviously, what Georgia might look like starting this season. I'm going to wait until next week probably to do any kind of SEC predictions, and that'll be right on the cusp of starting the season, which is awesome. And then we'll kind of round out the episode here, at least, talking about the few games that are going on in Week 0 this year, but there is one notable matchup at least that's happening out of the country. That's pretty exciting. We'll talk a little bit about that, kind of wrapping things up, even with the College Football 25 game. So again, if you guys are listening, I greatly appreciate it. Make sure you give us that 5-star wherever you listen on podcast, on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or Apple Podcast. I'd greatly appreciate that. So let's get into the SEC championship conversation that I want to talk about. I think the last time we met, I kind of talked with Hunter a little bit, and even over the last couple of seasons, we've talked about how is the SEC championship game important? Because to me, it almost got to that point where maybe it's not very important. Maybe it's not something that you have to win every single year to matter. We've seen that in years past where Alabama has gone on not to win the SEC, but gone on to win a national championship following it up. And I know how much it means to Kirby, but I've kind of had my own opinion of wondering, does it really matter? And even before this, I kind of thought, hey, maybe the SEC championship game doesn't really matter. Maybe that doesn't matter if you win it. And I'm changing my mind on it the more I've kind of dove into this 12-team playoff look, because from my understanding, if you're winning the SEC championship game, you are getting one of the top 4 seeds in that position. So the way that I looked at the top 25, not the top 25, but the college football playoffs, obviously being expanded to that 12 team, now the way that it does it is the ranking of these teams is going to be done by the committee when the time comes, but the 4 highest ranked conference champions will be seeded 1 through 4 and will receive the first round bye. So what I look at in that now is all of a sudden you might not even be the highest ranked SEC team. You might be ranked 10th in the country, But if you win the SEC championship game, all of a sudden you have a 1, 2, 3, or even 4 seed going into the playoffs. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's what I read into this. You might be the 10th ranked team in the country. You might be a 10-2 team going into that SEC championship game and win it, and all of a sudden you could be ranked 3rd or 4th, seeded 3rd or 4th with a bye to start it. So all of a sudden I'm kind of walking back where I felt like the SEC championship game somewhat felt like it wasn't going to matter. All of a sudden it matters a lot, and I guess that's a good thing about this expanded playoff is that is now it makes those conference championship games really mean something. And there was a point in time there here for the past few years that I've kind of looked at it as maybe it doesn't really mean that much other than bragging rights of saying, hey, I won the SEC. Again, I know what it means to Kirby. I know what it means to a lot of these other coaches to win the SEC. But in my mind, it kind of started to get dampered by the fact that you didn't have to win that to get in the playoffs and to win a national championship. Heck, sometimes you didn't even have to play in the game to go on to win a national championship. So it kind of started to negate the fact that you had to play in that game. Now, we know this. Just because you win that and you get seated in the top 4, you get a bye. That is a perk. But that doesn't mean that 2, 3, maybe even 4 other teams in the SEC might not reach the playoffs without ever even getting in that game. That is still a possibility. But without winning that game now, you have to play in the first round regardless. So I'm kind of walking back. I'm kind of taking some steps back, and I'll admit that. That I do now see the SEC championship game as being very important. It's very important to win it. We talked with Hunter in the bonus episode in the off season here. How much is this going to matter? Is the SEC championship game going to matter? We're going to the 12 team. You get the bye. You got home field advantage in those first couple of games. And I'll just admit that I was kind of wrong about that. I felt like that might be better to kind of skip out on it. That's one less game to have to play. And it is that, but seeding wise, you probably want to play in that game and win that game. So I'm kind of walking that back at least. So I'll admit that here off the top. That's one thing I look at. And again, I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to get in this. We talked about this with Hunter, was kind of what I was getting to there. I kind of got sidetracked, but we don't have divisions anymore. So it's the top 2 teams that are going to be playing one another. You have a strong candidacy for 4 teams that I look at, and again, we'll rank. And I'll kind of give my SEC predictions next week. I'll hold on to that until then. But Georgia's vying for one of those top spots. Texas is up there vying for it. Alabama's still there. And even an Ole Miss that's up in the mix looking to try to win the SEC. Not to negate what Missouri is doing and Tennessee's doing, following closely behind there as well. You've got a lot of teams that can fight for the SEC and to win that crown and to get to the SEC championship game. Because, again, you don't have those divisions this year. So that's a fun thing. Again, some of this you've probably heard on different podcasts, you've heard on different shows, and you're going, Holden, why are you talking about that 8 days out from the season? Hey, I'm just getting started back with season 5 of this this show, so I might be a little behind the 8 ball, but guess what? I'm catching up, and we're going to talk about it because these are the things I think that matters as we kind of get started into the season here. So that's what I'm looking at on that. Again, the fun part about this is the first, 5 games? Well, I guess it's only 4 games of the 5 through 12 seed, all of those get a home field advantage. So even if you don't win the SEC championship game and get one of those top 4 seeds, you still have a fun opportunity to potentially seed highly and be able to be a home field advantage in those ways. And that's going to happen. Again, there's a strong possibility that the 2 teams playing in the SEC championship game, one of those losers ends up getting a home field advantage in the first round of the playoffs, which is still kind of a fun thing to me. But again, it just makes the SEC championship game matter more than I thought that it did before. So really quickly, I kind of want to take a look at least at the AP Top 25. This did come out, I think, a couple of weeks ago now. I can't really remember. At this point, again, lots going on. We're getting busy. It's talking season is over. It's time to start playing football, and which, again, just such an exciting thing. But this is where the rankings line up if you haven't heard them already. Georgia, obviously, at the top of these rankings. Ohio State right behind them, Oregon in 3rd, Texas 4th, Alabama 5th, Ole Miss 6th, Notre Dame 7, Penn State 8, and Michigan 9, also Florida State 10. That's the top 10. When I look at this top 10, honestly, I don't see a lot in it that really sticks out to me. Georgia, again, I think is going to be a good football team. Ohio State is going to be a really good football team. Oregon, Texas, all of these teams are going to be really good. The only one that I look at and I really kind of scratch my head about is Notre Dame. And the only reason I say that is it seems like every year we overhype Notre Dame, and Notre Dame for whatever reason ends up being in the top 10 position, and they never fill out that spot. They always fall plenty behind, and it's like why every year do we give Notre Dame that nod to being a team who gets a top 10 position? Now I could eat crow on this in the weeks to come. Notre Dame could start the season at Texas A&M at 7:30 on the 31st and make me really eat my words, and so be it if that happens. Hey, then I'll give the kudos to them. But until they really start to play some of these football games and it matter in that way, and again, I should also say this: top 25 preseason polls, they don't matter. They really don't. I get that as well. But Notre Dame is really the only one that sticks out to me. Penn State's kind of the same way. I mean, Penn State, you know, they just really haven't done anything. They're always a team that might be sitting there 9-3, 10-2, but it's an Ohio State that they can't get over. It's a Michigan they can't get over. It's some of those games that they play that they can't get over, and they're never really in the conversation at the end of the year. They always play good football games and have really good seasons, but it's 10 wins enough for James Franklin up there at Penn State? I don't know. And Michigan at 9, again, that just kind of makes me chuckle because I think Michigan's really going to tumble as this season goes. I don't see them carrying a lot back after the season they had last year. A lot like an LSU of 2019 going into that 2020 season, if you ask me. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with them. Florida State, I like at 10. I think they bring back a good bit, but they also lost a lot last year. And the question mark is going to be on DJ Uyunglele. I'll say his name there instead of at the end. But there's still a lot of question marks on him. It's his third football team that he's playing for. I kind of feel like he's going to be a good fit at Florida State, but that's just me. Let's kind of move forward through this top 25 here. Missouri at 11, I do like that. Missouri is a really good football team. I will say this. It's different not seeing them on the schedule this year, but I don't necessarily hate it. Georgia has a really tough schedule this year, which I'm excited for and looking forward to these big matchups that we're going to have week in and week out this season. And Missouri not being on there doesn't necessarily hurt my feelings with the games that we do have on the schedule in place of it. Rounding out the top 25 here, though, we got Utah at 12, LSU at 13, Clemson 14, Tennessee 15, Oklahoma 16, Oklahoma State at 17, Kansas State at 18, Miami at 19, Texas A&M at 20, Arizona 21, Kansas 22, USC at 23, North Carolina State, NC State at 24, and Iowa rounds out the top 25 in the 25 position. So a lot going on there in the top 25. Again, AP poll preseason, does it matter? No. It's just kind of a gauge to give you something to look at and to talk about like we're doing right here before the season starts. This very well has a potential for a lot to change in the weeks to kind of come, especially after the first true week of the season here coming up in 2 weeks, or really just a little bit over a week away. A lot's going to change by the time we get there. But that's at least what they kind of anticipate. And again, in the top 5 especially, I really like the top 5 that they've got lined up. 5 of the teams that more than likely are going to be standing there at the end of the season, vying for those college football playoff positions, and also looking to get one of those top 4 spots especially. And then, obviously you get the huge change-up that we've talked about in the bye season as well with conference realignment too. So now in Ohio State and in Oregon, both playing in the Big Ten system, Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas there in the top 6, all vying for an SEC spot. So a lot of fun's going to happen this year. I don't know what's coming. I really don't. I don't know what kind of season this is going to turn out for not only Georgia, but for all of the country. But I feel like it's going to be a pretty exciting and fun one. I want to talk a little bit now about just the Carson Beck hype that's going on. I've seen a lot of different places that have talked about the hype of Carson Beck and starting to kind of hype up a few other guys. And one of the big ones that I've seen that's come up here lately is the Heisman conversation. They're a little bit in the off season. Carson really started having some hype on himself as far as being a Heisman contender at the top of those rankings in preseason kind of betting odds ways at least. And Carson Beck has a great opportunity this season to bring a Heisman back to Georgia for the first time since Herschel Walker back in 1980. And that's an exciting thing to think about. We've got a long season ahead. I don't want to put a lot of pressure on him or make him feel like, hey, I've got to live up to this for me to really matter, because he doesn't. And I think we all know that as Georgia fans, is you don't have to win the Heisman for us to be excited and happy for the way that you played for this university. We've won 2 national championships over the past 3 seasons. and we haven't had a Heisman winner in that, because to me, does a Heisman Trophy matter? Absolutely. It's a great accolade for one player, but I would much rather win national championships than I would Heisman's. With that being said, if Carson Beck won it, that would still be awesome. And based on FanDuel, at least, the odds for Carson is plus 800. He's second right now to win the Heisman, behind only Oregon's quarterback and Dylan Gabriel at plus 550. He's continuing to get more and more hype. Dan Lanning is doing a lot over there in Eugene with Oregon, and I'm excited to see how things go with him. I've always liked Dan Lanning. Was a great coach for us, and kind of excited to see what he can do up there at Oregon. And again, the past couple of years, he's done really well with the program. He's definitely got things rolling. If he could ever get over Utah, he'd have a much better ending to his season, at least, as they kind of join in on the Big Ten over there. Again, the season is only 8 days away, and we open up things with Clemson. Such an exciting way to start the season, a rivalry that really dates back a while, but Georgia, really, with exception to playing just a couple of years ago in the season opener, we kind of got away from that rivalry a little bit. This is one that I would love to see Georgia play pretty much every year, just like we played Georgia Tech at the end of the year. I'd love to have a Clemson scheduled in there every year, if not every other year at least, just because I think that's a fun rivalry and it's a fun football game. It's two really good football teams, coached by really good head coaches there in Dabo Swinney and obviously Kirby Smart. And I think it's going to be a good game to start the season. I know it was a lot of fun in Charlotte a couple of years ago when we opened up with them. Low-scoring game, but it showed you just how good both of those defenses were in what would turn out to be one of Georgia's best defensive performances. Heck, one of the best college football in history of college football defenses that ever touched the field in that 21 season. So I don't know that we're going to have that same kind of deal this year. I don't know. The line's a lot higher on it. Georgia is a 13.5-point favorite coming into that game. I'm not really sure. I should have looked back. Let's see. I might be able to look real quick and see what Georgia's is starting against Clemson. Yeah, it's like 49.5, and what we scored. Well, I can't even remember right now if it was 13-7 or 10-7. It might have been 10-7 the start of that season. So I don't think we got over 20 points in that opener a couple of years ago, and the line on this one's almost 50 points. So, or the over under at least. So will we touch that? I don't know. Very good question. If Georgia does, I would say this could be a lot like a Georgia-Oregon start just a couple of years ago as well, where Georgia really was firing on all cylinders to start the season. I would love that. Not saying that's what's going to happen, but that would be a fun way to start the season, and just kind of prove yourself and fire right off where you left off, so to speak, when playing Florida State at the end of the season last year in bowl season. But that's exciting. Again, we only have just 8 days until we get to getting to that game. There you go. Get it out your mouth, Holden. And I'm really excited about that, as is everybody else. Georgia, again, opens the season first. We are also first in the odds to win the national championship at plus 280. You have, I'm fairly certain most everybody has Ohio State right there with them. And they do at plus 400. Oregon behind them at 650. Texas at 850. Alabama at 1400, as well as Ole Miss. A lot of people are picking Alabama to win the national championship this year as well, even though they don't have the highest odds in this. I don't know. Again, I'll kind of save some predictions for next year, or next week, I should say. But I think it's going to be a fun season nonetheless. Toughest games this year. Hunter and I kind of talked about it, but I'll be honest with you. I think the toughest game on the season this schedule is going to be when we have to go to Austin and play Texas. I know we have to go to Alabama earlier in the season. Luckily, we get that off of a bye. We have to go to Ole Miss. We get Tennessee at home. I think we get Auburn at home this year. Obviously, you go to Jacksonville against Florida. So we've got so many fun games. Last year, it's not that we didn't have fun games. It's just it didn't feel like quite as important of a season. And this year just feels all the more better having the games that we do have on tap for this season. I don't think you can look at a schedule, with the exception of maybe the home schedule, the games that you get coming in. But really, to me, even though we're having to go on the road for a lot of these, man, it's such a fun season that we're about to have. Do I anticipate Georgia going undefeated and it just being the easiest season ever? No, because we have some of the hardest road games that I think I've ever seen Georgia have in a single season. But I'm looking forward to that opportunity, not only for our guys to get to go and play in those, but these are meaningful, high caliber football games. It means a lot to be able to go to these places and play them. You're going to be national spotlight every single week in the games that you play, which is going to matter a lot when we get later in the season. Really looking forward to this season. Again, next week we'll kind of do some of the SEC predictions. Let's get down to Georgia Tech and FSU playing in Ireland on Saturday. FSU is a 10.5-point favorite. Over under on that one's 55.5. I'll be honest with you, kind of seeing how Georgia Tech played at the end of the year. Heck, the way that they played all season. You think about the Miami game where they never gave up, and for whatever reason, Cristobal wouldn't take a knee and end that game. Georgia Tech wins that, and Georgia Tech fought Georgia pretty well at the end of the season. I don't think Georgia Tech is a team to just sleep on, and FSU could be sleepwalking. I don't think they'll be sleepwalking into this game, but there is the potential just to have that little bit of a hangover from the end of last season. And I'm just excited to see what it is that both of these teams are going to bring to the table to start the season. They get to do it in a cool way, playing over in Dublin, which is going to be exciting to see. Just because, I mean, anytime you get to play in another country, it's fun. I think, what was it last year, like Northwestern and Nebraska were the teams we saw play overseas, and that wasn't, that was kind of boring to me. But I think this one's going to mean a lot more just because it's two bigger teams, one of which we just finished playing and the other of which we'll play at the end of this season in our rival there at Georgia Tech. But I think this is going to be a really good football game. It gives you a great opportunity to see exactly what it is that DJ Uiagalelei is going to be for FSU. How good is he going to look trying to fill the role that Jordan Travis had there at FSU? I don't know. Some of me feels like, man, he could really shine in this system under Mike Norvell. But then there's part of me that goes, okay, this is his third school. I know that he had to follow Trevor Lawrence there at Clemson, which is hard to do. I don't think people give him enough credit to say, hey, you tried to fill the shoes of a guy in Trevor Lawrence who, that's hard to do. It's really hard to fill his shoes. He's successful in the NFL in a sense, and everybody expected Clemson just not to take a step down when he took over that role, and that's just hard to really do. And he didn't, and he faced that criticism, and it just didn't work for him. Left and went to Oregon State. I feel like he did at least a little better there, and I feel like he could do really good at FSU, or it could all just come crashing down on him, and we just look and say, okay, it was just a lost cause. But I really think he's going to fit in with that Mike Norvell offense. Excited to see what they do. I don't know that I would touch this 10.5 with FSU as far as if you're a betting person. But the over-under 55.5, I'll be honest with you, I think this is going to be an under 55.5 kind of a game. I could really see this one, a 34-17 kind of game, a little bit less than that maybe. But I don't really see this going over 55.5. So that's kind of what I have on that. And then let's round this thing out with some just kind of fun talk here. And that's just the college football 25 game. I've had a lot of fun playing it so far. I know a lot of people have played it. I've seen so much criticism of, this game wasn't really ready. Listen, I was just excited to pick the game up and get to play and just have fun with it. And I still kind of feel that same exact way today. Are there issues with it? Yes. Are there things that need to be fixed? Yes. Am I happy about it? Yes. Am I looking forward to the next time playing? Yes, as well. So it doesn't really matter to me that the game is not perfect. It's just a fun thing to play. And I've really enjoyed it so far. And again, it was kind of, to me, we got to get into football season before football season truly got here. And now it's here, and now we get to kind of play along with it at the same time. And if you guys were playing back in 2014 when the final game, or 2013, I should say, really, when the final game of NCAA 14 came out, you guys kind of know what I'm talking about. It was just a fun time back then, and it's fun to kind of have those times now, quirks and all. They'll get them worked out. This is the first iteration of this game in a decade. So there's a lot to get worked out, and they'll do that. And I look forward to that. But for right now, hey, I'm happy with what they've given us, and I look forward to what's to come with it. But again, it was kind of that insight to, hey, football season's right around the corner. Now we're here. And it also, to me, it kind of gave me that little bit more of an insight to the college football playoffs. Because, again, we haven't seen it live. You can mock draft it all you want on paper. You can do the same thing on SportsCenter or ESPN or SEC Network. It doesn't matter. You can show all that on screen, but until you actually kind of get to see it play out, you don't really know. Because, again, that's where I really started stepping back the SEC championship game, and it sounds kind of silly by playing a video game, but it's what made me realize, hey, Just because 1 through 12 are ranked 1 through 12 does not mean that's how you line up when you actually play one another, because it's not. Because the top 4 seeds, again, the number 1 team in the country, and let's just say Georgia. Let's take last year's SEC championship game and kind of play devil's advocate with that. Well, Georgia's the number 1 team in the country. Playing in the SEC championship game as the number 1 team. Let's just take Alabama, for instance. Let's say they're ranked 5th in the country at this point in time, and Alabama wins the SEC championship game. Well, guess what? Now they are getting either 1, 2, 3, or 4. They're getting that rank because they won the SEC championship game. Even if they might not be the highest ranked SEC team in that moment, let's just say Georgia still only falls to like 3rd or so. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but Georgia would no longer be ranked above them in that spot. Let's take just Ole Miss, for instance. Let's say they're ranked 6th, and all of a sudden they're 1 spot out, but they're not playing for the SEC championship game. Well, guess what? They're not going to get that higher seed. No matter what, they're going to be 5th or lower. More likely 6th or lower, taking that 5th conference champion and putting them at the 5 spot. So there's a lot to be said for that. And again, it's kind of funny to me that I really started realizing that when watching the rankings in a video game, because that's where you truly kind of got to play with it and see, oh, okay, this doesn't just line up 1 through 12 and it's just that simple, because the top 4 teams in the country will not be the top 4 seeds in the college football playoff. And again, you might be screaming through whatever you're listening to right now going, we know this, you idiot. Why didn't you realize this before? I don't know. It took me playing a video game to realize it, I guess. But hey, it is what it is. Hey, I appreciate you guys being here. Again, I look forward to trying to get this thing back up and running, even if it's only on audio for a little while. Just excited to be back with you guys for Season 5 of Dog Talk. And I look forward to the games coming up this weekend in Week 0. Especially looking forward to the games coming up here in a couple of weeks when Georgia finally takes the field for the first time in 2024. Again, follow us over on X, Instagram, and on Facebook at Dog Talk 20. I'll check in with you guys next week. Go Dogs!